Hi, I'm James Bruce. You're watching MakeUseOf.com TV, and this is the 3DRudder, a unique foot controller input device. It's available now for just under $150. And today I'm taking a look at it from the perspective of a VR user. Now, since it can emulate any number of things from a keyboard, joystick and mouse, as well as VR input, it obviously has uses beyond just the world of VR. However, I'm specifically looking at it from the perspective of VR. So before we begin, I'd like to say thank you to 3DRudder for providing us with a review unit and another one to give away to one lucky reader. Head on over to the link in the description to find out how you can win. Now, of course, the 3DRudder isn't just for VR. It can emulate a joystick, a keyboard, or even a mouse. So it's actually compatible with a huge range of software and application experiences out there. Like most third-party input devices, it comes with a list of ready-made profiles. And if your game or software is lucky enough to be listed there, then the setup is as simple as loading your game and then clicking on the profile button and clicking load while it uploads that profile to the device itself. Then just put your feet on it to center the device and you're sorted. Now, if there isn't a profile available, it's not a problem. It does still have those basic input modes, either as keyboard, mouse, joystick, or the new specific VR input methods, which you can configure and tweak until they feel right to you. There's quite a lot of configuration you can do for each action, such as acceleration and dead zone. But the basic actions you can perform on the device are tilting forwards and backwards to move forwards and backwards, obviously, tilting left and right to strafe. You can also twist the device to provide turning motion, and there are two additional actions for up and down, which involve lifting up the heel of one foot and the front of your other, or vice versa. Apart from the up and down actions, it's all very intuitive and easy to get a hang of. It feels completely natural. So specifically with respect to VR, I tried a number of different experiences. I started with my current favorite game of Fallout 4, which is really not designed to be played seated. It doesn't even have a native height fixing ability in the game, so if you do play seated, you're going to be playing through the game as if you were a very small person. Now, I have about 10 hours in it so far, which has been played standing up with regular smooth motion, which is where you press a button and you will move forward. And so far, I haven't gotten any kind of motion sickness from that. However, smooth motion in general is quite sick-inducing for new VR users. So I did want to test out if the 3DRudder specifically could help to eliminate some of that motion sickness. So first up, the 3DRudder driver actually includes height fixes, so you can play the game whilst sitting down at the height of a normal person. So that's pretty cool. They also have a specific profile for it, so all you need to do is boot up the game and then load the Fallout 4 profile. I did unfortunately find that the forward motion on the 3DRudder was still tied to the direction of the controller. Now, this is something that the standard game has, where if you push the forward button on the controller but you're actually pointing to the side, you'll end up strafing off that way. So motion is relative to your controller direction. And unfortunately, it's the same thing with the 3DRudder. Pushing forwards on the 3DRudder and pointing the controller to the side meant that the motion I expected to be moving forwards was often off to the side. And when it's on the same controller, pressing this button to go this way, it makes sense. But when you're controlling it through the 3DRudder and through the controller, I couldn't quite connect the two, and it was a bit weird. So you do have to remember to keep your controller forwards. On the plus side, the 3DRudder drivers also add in smooth turning, which isn't actually a feature in the base game. It only features snap turning, where you press a button to move, say, 90 degrees at a time. By using the spinning 3DRudder feature, your character in the game will actually spin around. So that's pretty impressive that they've achieved that kind of level of deep integration with the game. That said, that feature did also seem to introduce more problems for me than it solved. The main issue for me was that I had some trouble with my feet not always being completely centered on the device, particularly when they sort of slip around a bit. And this meant that in some cases my feet would be off center and therefore considered to be spinning. So the world was almost imperceivably spinning while I was trying to stand still. And that's something you really want to avoid in VR, because that's the sort of unintended motion that introduces motion sickness. So although it did make it possible to play Fallout 4 sitting down, I wasn't all that comfortable with it. It actually introduced sickness where I had never had it before with smooth locomotion and standing up. So not such of a win there. Next, I tried the Aircar Demo, which is a slow-paced flying car tech demo on the Oculus. And just to note there that it is compatible with both the Vive via SteamVR and the Oculus Rift, with separate VR drivers for each. And that's on top of all the basic keyboard, joystick, mouse controller emulation modes. So it's pretty cool that they've managed to cover pretty much every base you could possibly want. The software element of the 3DRudder is really good. So Aircar, the demo, is actually pretty notorious for making new VR users sick. I'm not sure why, because it's a fairly slow demo. Your Aircar doesn't fly around that quickly, but regardless, it makes a lot of people sick. Now, I tried for the first time both with standard controls and with the 3DRudder, and in both cases, neither made me sick. I felt fine, and personally, the 3DRudder felt really good for that kind of game. It felt very natural. And to really put that to the test, I put my wife onto playing it too. She's never touched the demo before, so she was completely new to this as well, and I'll let her speak for herself. I'm really just testing to see if you feel sick this time. Do you feel any sick?
I can't control that one well.
Was it easier to control with your feet? Okay.
It got two hand controller. I don't know which one should go, which I have to learn. That one doesn't need to learn.
But it doesn't make you feel any more sick this way?
Yeah, a little bit sick.
But you didn't feel sick using it with the other foot thing? Interesting. So for her, it certainly helped, and I think it made the controls feel a lot more natural than thumbsticks often can. Lastly, I tried Google Earth VR as well. Now, kind of oddly, flying around using the 3DRudder in Google Earth felt very natural, but it didn't actually respect the comfort mode settings that Google Earth has. When you use the thumbstick controls to move around, by default it has a narrowing of the field of view. It restricts your field of view while you're flying around, and then it widens it back out again when you stand still and just naturally look around. But when using the 3DRudder, it didn't respect those settings. It just flew straight around. Now that said, even so, I still spent a good 10 minutes following the River Thames, flying through the air as fast as I could handle, and I didn't experience any sickness at all. It felt really natural and a really great way of interacting with Google Earth VR. However, when I started to run the built-in Google Earth demos, which take you to a number of places, automatically switching every 30 seconds or 1 minute, then I started to feel sick, and I'm not really sure why.
Oh God, feel sick now.
I think perhaps when I had full agency over what I was doing in the game, just flying around naturally with the 3DRudder, it felt fine. But once I gave away some of that agency to the game and let it teleport me around sometimes, the addition of that perhaps didn't quite work so well for me. Still, that's not really the 3DRudder's fault, that's more just Google Earth. But certainly the 3DRudder felt like a really natural way and really sort of complemented the Google Earth VR experience. So in summary then, it didn't quite work for me as a catch-all controller for seated VR experiences. And in some games like Fallout 4 VR, it actually made me feel a little bit sick, where I previously didn't, just standing up and using that same smooth locomotion method. Now again, I can't be sure if that's because of the 3DRudder's limitations itself, or if it's because I wasn't used to doing that sitting down, because usually I stand playing up, and pressing a button, smoothly moving around there is no problem for me. But it could be that sitting down and doing the same thing is something I would have to get used to again. And to be honest, in that case, I think I can say it doesn't really help with motion sickness so much as you'll still be getting used to motion sickness, just a different kind of motion sickness. But I do also think it's because of the inherent limitations of the 3DRudder, in that it can be quite easy to make some unintended movements, such as having your feet slightly off center and ending up with the world spinning ever so slightly. What's moving?
Boat.
It shouldn't be moving.
It's turning.
Well, your feet, center your feet.
Oh. I can't center my feet.
Why not?
I don't know, it's still moving.
Take your feet off once then.
Okay.
When you're in VR and you can't see your feet, it's difficult to keep them directly on the middle of this. They do slip around a bit. I think if there were some slightly raised bits at the edges or in the middle where you could clearly feel straight away where your feet are supposed to be and where the center is and not slip around, that would really help the design. It would probably also help if you used a chair that didn't spin around, because after fidgeting a bit, in Google Earth for instance, I often found myself doing the up and down motions without actually intending to, and I think that's because naturally when I spin in this chair, my feet end up one being higher at the heel than the other, and which this interpreted as wanting to do the up-down motion. Of course, I could have tweaked the profile there to either ignore the up-down motion completely or add a bit more of a dead zone. So I think if I spent some more time configuring the options in the software, I could eliminate that problem. What I can say is that it certainly does offer a unique and often more natural way to interact with certain types of VR games and experiences. Not so much for first-person shooters maybe, but for things like Google Earth VR and for the Aircar flying demo, it did feel really natural. It did feel like a much more intuitive way of interacting compared to thumbsticks. Now, it doesn't replace the motion controllers completely in any of the games that I tried. In Aircar, for instance, I still needed the trigger to accelerate the vehicle, but it is going to augment them. If, for instance, you aren't able to stand while playing 3D games, either out of choice or because of some kind of disability, but you still have motion in your feet, then this could be a really useful addition to your setup. It's certainly not going to be for everyone. I wouldn't call it a must-buy just because you have VR, but in the right circumstances, it will really benefit you. That said, although it feels very natural and intuitive with certain types of games, it doesn't feel all that responsive, so it really wouldn't be suitable for more twitchy kind of games. It does actually come with a profile for Robo Recall. It requires some other extra drivers and hacking to get working, but that's the kind of game I really wouldn't recommend 3DRudder for. It's just too twitchy, too fast. You really do need to be able to use the sort of teleport features in that. Ultimately, is it worth $140, $150? Yeah, it could be for you. It's not a must-buy for every VR player. It's not an essential accessory, but in certain circumstances, it could be really good. From a new VR user's perspective, if you do have problems with motion sickness while smoothly moving around in games, I would suggest you just get used to it. Don't think that this is going to solve your motion sickness problems, because it probably won't. It'll just be a different set of problems you're getting used to. If you do have $150 burning a hole in your pocket and you're just looking for some new way to play VR games because you're not happy with the motion controllers, I'd suggest you get a joystick and throttle for flying space games or a steering wheel for racing games. I wouldn't go out and buy a 3DRudder just because you're bored of using a Xbox controller or whatever. Anyway, thanks again to 3DRudder for letting us check out their innovative foot controller. Pick yours up now or head on over to the link in the description to enter our giveaway. The competition's open for about 2 weeks from when this video is published, and if you aren't already, please subscribe to the channel. We do 2 or 3 giveaways a week, as well as technology tips, DIY tech tutorials, and all the good stuff from all of us over at MakeUseOf.com. Thanks for watching.